All right. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us on a Friday. We got some nice weather happening here, so I think spring is upon us. So I think looking at some of the names, the majority of you likely know who I am, but I'm Kenda McKenzie, General Manager of Halifax Water. And we have a team here today to run through, we're regrouping on our regional development charge engagement sessions. And I think this is covered in some of the presentation, but a lot of you will recall we were going down a path of getting ready to do our 5-year update. And when the charge was frozen, we looked at pausing that process, and now we're going to regroup and get the process going again. So Megan is going to go through the slides and kind of give an overview of where we are, what we're doing, what feedback we're going to be looking for, and then we have a whole team here between our engineering, our asset management, our accounting team, and we can take questions and start mapping out the process to continue this journey that we're on. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Megan, and glad that everybody's here today. Thank you.
All right. Yes, thank you, Kenda, for that introduction. And here we are in 2026, ready to regroup with our interested party engagement. The theme of this engagement session is kind of regrouping, providing background information, and moving forward as we go through the 5-year update of the RDC. So with that, just have to press the slide in a moment. Just a moment. Okay, slide. Try that again. Okay, so here we are. And also a very good warm welcome to those that'll be joining us at a different time in a different place. And with saying that, the session is going to be recorded. And is being recorded right now and then posted onto YouTube. So if you have any colleagues that have missed out on this presentation, they're more than welcome to watch it and to provide feedback. Just as a friendly reminder, please show respect with your comments and questions. The attending list is set to anonymous. Myself and a couple people at Halifax Water can see who you are. So if you do have any questions or comments for the discussion session, please announce your name, use the raise your hand function. Please keep your microphones muted and your kind of cameras off during the presentation slide, as there will be an opportunity for discussion. Opportunity for discussion slides are indicated with this. Just one moment, are indicated with this kind of like pause for discussion button there. I'll warn you, the first couple of slides are just going to be me talking, introducing topics, and then we're really going to get into the feedback sessions. Feedback can be provided, or if you have any questions, to engineeringapprovals@halifaxwater.ca. I'm going to be discontinuing the RDC 2025 email that was set up last year. So with that, the agenda that we have for this next hour and a half, we'll start off of what is a regional development charge. We'll go into the timeline of recent events, go into the 5-year update set for July 10th of 2026, discuss the demand side management aspect, and then we'll get into that discussion and feedback with a couple of questions that have come up. And those questions are like when the freeze ends in November, the timing of the RDC collection at water meter, and that permit influx with any RDC increase. We will end with the proposed interested party engagement plan, and then also summarize what we just did. So with that, what is a regional development charge? So we know that new development must pay costs related to growth and development. And you've heard the slogan before, growth must pay for growth. It is not the responsibility of our existing ratepayers to upsize infrastructure for new customers. So with that, regional infrastructure upgrades triggered by growth are identified through the Integral Resource Plan, or the IRP. And that with these upgrades, they're funded by the Regional Development Charge, which is collected at the permit stage. An RDC, in its simplest form, is the cost of the infrastructure for growth divided by the growth is essentially what the regional development charge is. I won't be going into great detail with what exactly those numbers are, but if you would like to go into detail, we do have a population workshop from last January that is located here. I believe that's a hyperlink. If not, it's on the engagement website. For more information about our infrastructure list for growth, we do have we had another workshop for that. And then of course, it's not just a simple calculation of dividing. There's a lot of financial assumptions and the application of the charge that go into that calculation. And that was kind of a combined separate workshop that you can go to get more information. So with that, knowing that important aspects of the regional development charge, we have the regional infrastructure in the IRP. So we're going to go into depth of what is regional infrastructure in the Halifax Water context. So when we look at types of infrastructure at Halifax Water, we have three categories, that being the local infrastructure, the area master infrastructure, coming through as a capital cost contribution, or CCC, and the regional infrastructure. When we look at the local infrastructure, this is water and wastewater servicing buildings that are connected to them. This local infrastructure is built and paid for by the developer and then donated to Halifax Water so we can own and operate it for our future customers. An example of this can be seen right outside of Cowie Hill with a subdivision where these wastewater pipes were installed by the developer at the developer's cost and then given to Halifax Water. Another type of infrastructure is area master infrastructure, which comes through a capital cost contribution, or CCC. These areas are master planned areas where the infrastructure is looked at in a holistic way to make sure that who could benefit from infrastructure on someone else's land. So the base infrastructure is paid for by the developer. However, if that infrastructure needs to be oversized to benefit other parts of that land in that master infrastructure, it is oversized and paid for by the CCC. An example of this is over in West Bedford. You can see that on Broad Street. Here's a little snippet of it. This is a 400. The 300 to 400 oversizing component is paid for by the CCC, but getting to the 300 is paid for by the developer. If it was just the developer developing, they may need a smaller pipe, whereas the 400 is benefiting everyone in that master plan area. And then lastly, we get to the regional infrastructure. This is the larger infrastructure, such as the treatment plants and the infrastructure to get to that treatment plants. This infrastructure is identified in the IRP, the Integral Resource Plan, for asset renewal, compliance, and growth. This growth portion of that infrastructure is paid for by the RDC. And an example of this is the Dartmouth treatment plant and the infrastructure that brings the wastewater to that treatment plant. So again, Halifax Water has broadly three types of infrastructure. The local infrastructure that is paid for by the developer and donated to Halifax Water at their cost. The area master infrastructure that is identified through a planning process and a capital cost contribution. And the regional infrastructure that is paid for by the RDC and identified as part of the IRP. So to take another look as an example of local versus regional, let's look to the M District. M District is a recent example that went to council. And what is local infrastructure and what is regional infrastructure? So up here we have the mall. Halifax Water considers the local infrastructure to be this pipe. I think it's around a 300. And then it connects down here to what we would call the regional infrastructure. Some of you may know this as the North Dartmouth trunk sewer. So this infrastructure, when the building permits come in, they will have to prove that there's capacity in this local infrastructure. If there is no capacity, it is up to the developer to do the upgrades that are necessary. This is about local infrastructure can be sometimes, kilometers long, include a couple pump stations. This is a simple case. It just kind of goes downhill and then it meets a 1200 pipe, which is the North Dartmouth trunk sewer. And this is where the regional infrastructure comes in and is paid for and is identified through the regional the IRP. We have proposed Port Wallace going through this pipe. We have Dartmouth Crossing going through this pipe. This is where we holistically look at the plan for growth in this type of infrastructure, as an example. So with that, that's the kind of regional infrastructure. Another part is that integral resource plan, or the IRP. Halifax Infrastructure Investment Plan to support decisions over the next 30 years is done in IRP. The 30 years is important to remember because our RDC plans are only 20 years. It supports organization objectives and corporate programs, outlines the recommendations to address the servicing needs of all the three drivers. Looking at the three drivers, we have our asset renewal, growth, and compliance. Asset renewal being, what do we need to replace? Pipe doesn't last for forever. Where does growth need to come in? How does that work with the existing infrastructure that is there? And then the compliance piece of what type of, for example, what type of treatment would the treatment plants need? With that, so outputs include like the infrastructure projects, the investment needed. We use a lot of the data, the engagement to see that 30-year plan. Of course, we're not just making a plan and then waiting for another 30 years until we do a new one. Things change. As we know, we can't predict the future. So we look at that IRP on a 5-year cycle. So with that, let's look at what's happened the last year with the RDC. So in February, we had our last engagements. Again, those engagements are on the YouTube and on the website for anyone to take a look and to refresh. And then from there in March, Halifax Water submitted applications for CHIF funding. If Halifax Water was awarded that funding, we would have to extend the freeze. So with that, the 5-year update was deferred in March of 2025. In the summer of 2025, Halifax Water submitted the RDC filing. Of course, we know the RDC has been frozen for the last couple of years, so we kind of just showed what it would be with the increased prices, with inflation. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail soon. In August, we posted the RDC model that has the infrastructure list to the engagement website. And then in August, we were also advised of the freeze on development charges extending to October 9th of this year. In January of 2026, Halifax Water learned that 2 of the 3 projects were deemed ineligible for CHIF funding. Again, that CHIF funding is the Canadian Housing Infrastructure Funding, the fund with that. And so with knowing this, we submitted documentation to say we're going to submit the 5-year update for July 10th. So that brings us to now, this period right here from April to June, as we engage interested parties in getting that July application ready. So again, let's jump back to the summer of 2025 and take a look at what Halifax Water submitted to the board to show what's happened with the charges. So as you know, in 2023, the charges were frozen, and this is what they were at that time. So in 2024, the rates, we submitted an application, and this application also included the water supply enhancement program that would have caused the RDC for the water to increase by about 76%. With this, look at the model, all the projects were kept the same. The 2019 assumptions for inflation were kept the same. The only thing that was added was the water supply enhancement program. And then in 2025, Halifax Water took a look at all the projects. As we know, those assumptions from 2019 were not inflation was a lot more than what those assumptions said. So we took a look at the projects, what was the best available information for each of those projects, and ran the model. And that's how, with those updated costs, and that's how these costs are shown here. So this is a drastic increase. Prices have increased, so that is expected for things to increase in cost. But looking at this, it was like, how do we compare Halifax Water to different development charges? And I'll go to kind of like a benchmarking scan. So development charges against all municipalities is not an apples to apples comparison. It's very difficult to do that. There's a lot going on. Some municipalities, especially in Ontario, have had development charges since the 90s. You look at Halifax Water, our charges started in 2014. Some areas have a lot of sand. Halifax, area has a lot of rock. And you can see from these different cities, and these cities came from the general rate application, which were cities of similar sizes to Halifax. And you can see the variety. I didn't include all of them because looking just at a single unit dwelling and taking out the water and the wastewater parts there's a lot of varied. So things like some were based on frontage, some were based on value, some were based on square footage. This is just a basic comparison with single unit dwellings. And what we can see from this is that, there's even some cities that have different areas. We look at Ottawa, they have 3 different charges that way, and some just have one. Toronto has the non-rental versus the rental. And then the average line is just the average of these 11 ones. So what we can see from this is that Halifax Water's proposed estimate for 2025 isn't the lowest. It is above average, but it isn't the highest. So let's take a look at the wastewater again in terms of where that average is. And again, benchmarking development charges is very difficult. It's not always an apples to apples comparison. I've done my best by just looking at the wastewater and the water charges for a single unit dwelling and try to look at them and scan to see where that information is. So with that, I do have a pause for discussion. Is there anything else I can consider with this comparison? I want to see how do we compare to other municipalities? I've used comparable cities as part of our general rate application, just looking at single unit dwellings. Does anyone else have any other ideas or other considerations that I haven't considered here? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Megan. So these 2 slides show that Halifax water is second highest in the country on both counts, water and wastewater.
Not in the country. This is
Well, on these slides there.
Yes, on these slides of these
Okay.
9 things. So the country would be vastly different. Well, BC is a lot more expensive. Toronto, these are just the cities from the general rate application. But yeah, you're correct. In terms of, the 9 cities I looked at, Halifax Water is second.
Because this is not a good slide from a comparison perspective. Is there a way to add some of the other municipalities across the country for a little added context? Because someone would look at this and say, this is not good. And the other part, just for additional context, what other charges would be part of a permit process? Building, whatever the case may be. That might be something as well to show context. But I think you should add some other municipalities in there, not just rate applications, but other municipalities, just to show that, because in isolation, this is not a good read.
Do you have any suggestions about cities?
So if I may, though, if you don't mind, I think, Megan, there was some initial municipalities, cities that you pulled when we were developing this. And I think there's no harm in adding those to the slide. As we said, the intention was just to line it up with some of the cities that we use to benchmark our rates against. but we can certainly add additional locations to this to give that broader snapshot of what's going on across the country.
And maybe, find out what in the world Ottawa inside the Green Belt and the rural service areas are doing, because that's a rounding error what they charge.
It's like it's an interesting aspect because like the water, what is it like inside the ground belt, like the water's okay, but like the wastewater is more. So it's it's not just like, oh, it's less inside the green belt, like for both. So they even have 4 charges, but the 4th one is the rural unservice. So they don't have that water and wastewater component to it. All right, Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So this the slide deck will be circulated.
Yes.
Okay. It would be very interesting if you had a slide that adds the two together, because
Okay.
I think that when you do that, the Halifax Water is going to tower above everybody else's. These slides underestimate the combined variance.
Between the two. Okay, and
Yeah.
that's like water and wastewater.
Yeah, because you look at who else is high on one, they're not high on the other, so it balances off. Versus where we're high on both, you stack both of those together, and I'd be interested to see how that graph looks if that could be done as well.
All right, James? I'm not sure if you, James, do you have your microphone on mute?
I'm sorry. Are you going to provide a similar graphic for multifamily and commercial?
That's a good question. This is just it's hard to compare those because they're not always apples to apples. The single unit dwelling was the easiest to pick from each one. There's a lot of categories in different, like for multi-unit dwellings. Some there are 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, bachelor. They have a charge for all 3 of those, but we only have 1. And then for the ICI, some will go industrial, commercial, institutional. They have 3 different rates for that, whereas we just have the 1. So kind of the easiest benchmarking scan I took was just the single unit dwelling. Would that be something that could be like that we could look into more?
I just think various parties would be interested in that. I understand there are challenges, and I don't know how difficult it would be to massage the data in a reasonable way to make those comparisons. But I'll leave it to you folks to see if it is possible. But I think it is of interest.
Yeah, it is of interest because there's a lot of information with these district charges. Ontario, there's a whole list like fire, police, libraries that they had to go through and kind of find that that water and wastewater piece for that scan. But yeah, that's a good point. What about everything else that's going on? Because they're not just limited to this single unit dwelling. All right, I see Peter. Oh, Peter Pauley, sorry, you're number 2.
Nope, nothing from me.
Okay, thank you. And then Peter Nightingale?
Yeah. My question was just kind of about what the different development charges from different cities actually cover, and if that accounts for some of the dollar value differences. So, like we know, or as I understand it, Halifax Water's RDCs only cover the growth portion of regional infrastructure, but in Ottawa, outside Ottawa is obviously a bizarre example. The differences in where you are, like, are they using theirs to pay for some more local level infrastructure upgrades that maybe in Halifax the developer would have to pay for directly? And so although it's a higher per unit cost, is it offsetting project-specific local upgrades that developers would have to do?
That is a good point. I don't know the exacts of like the Ottawa aspect of like the different areas, but that's something that that we could take a look at to kind of answer that question. I do know like these are just the water and wastewater components. I took fire stations, libraries out where I could, and if I couldn't take it out, the cities are not included. But yeah, that brings up a good point about what do other cities do. We are just looking at the regional infrastructure, but there's still, you still have to, unless you're, right on that lake, entering into that regional infrastructure, there's still a large component of that local infrastructure that isn't accounted for in Halifax water charges. Okay. Okay, and seeing, is there anyone else that has other things to consider? All right. We will move on to the next slide. Okay, just a minute. Okay, so this is time to take a look at that model. If we went back to that screen, we would, just a minute, have to get out of this. Okay, so taking a look at the model, I haven't had any questions about specific projects. I know with last February, we had the like infrastructure, share the infrastructure list. And this is like how we would like we shared the infrastructure list as part of the August submit like posting of this model. So if you go down here and you see the tabs, it's like the water phase costs and the wastewater phase costs. And this is where the infrastructure lists come in, and you can see like what infrastructure, how much are we estimating, how much is non-eligible. Non-eligible means this is not in the RDC, which means that this is the benefit to existing, how we kind of portioned those projects in terms of, a treatment plant upgrade does benefit existing customers at the same time as growth. So we have kind of put the benefit to existing and what is included. There was different methods. The methods aren't included within like the percentages. Like we don't share the method. Is that something that would be helpful to the community? Like if you knew exactly what method was involved with each one of these. I just wanted to highlight the infrastructure list. If anyone has any questions on like what it is you think that the percentages are too high, have any questions specifically, this is where that list is. Halifax Water did share it in August. And as a kind of like this is an estimate or best available information in 2025. This is subject to change for our application in July. And we are working on updating this list with our new capital budget, with new information that has happened over the last year. So it's like think numbers are going to change. Just wanted to share that. This is the infrastructure list that we're working with, and that information is posted and available for everyone. Okay, and we'll go on to the next slide. Oh, sorry, Alex?
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm ready for another day.
Great. So I may have I did enter the meeting a tad tardy here, and so this question could be left to the end if you want. But what is the and this is perhaps to Kenda as well, just because I had received the those emails back in the day in regards to the increase in RDC fees. If you remember, kind of like the recalculation that happened and the, I'll say, projected RDC fees moving forward, after the cap is removed, by the provincial government. Are those numbers still the same numbers? And are you going to go through those numbers in this call, or is that already taken place, or what's, can you shed some light on that?
I guess the numbers, like we're not going through the numbers. We don't have numbers of what 2026 is. 2025 was their best available information. There's more information, and we'll engage with with this community in the future of exactly what those numbers are, how they were calculated. Does that answer your question?
So if you can go back to slide 8, maybe, Megan. Hi, Alex.
Yeah, hi, Tori.
So I think right now, as it stands, the 2025 numbers are best available information. As we go through this process, there's a few things that we're going to be updating based on the review of the capital program that just got approved by our board. Making sure we have the right financial assumptions in the model, looking at how the rate is configured. So there's a bit more on the slides coming in this deck. But as it stands right now, the 2025 numbers would be, I guess, the current state of what the rates should be if the freeze was removed. So
Yeah, that's what I was looking
Yeah.
for. That was
Yeah.
the same numbers you sent me in an email there.
Yep,
It was
exactly.
at one point for the multis, it was at 19, but then you guys did some recalculation
Yeah.
and it ended up being at 12, which is pretty much what those two numbers are for the multis, 12.
Right.
So it will go to 12. That is a fact though. If they,
So-
once they lift
so-
the cap, you guys are gonna go from 5,300 to 11,800.
That's based on the numbers from 2025. Through this process of what we're going through today and what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, we'll be looking at, should that be adjusted further? So
Adjusted
that's where
adjusted further upwards or adjusted downwards?
I suspect it will be upwards, based on inflationary pressures, other things that would feed into the model. But we also have to be looking at it from the rate making perspective. And I think I'm going to take some thunder away from the rest of the presentation. There's population changes. So these are based on 2019 population projections and 2019 infrastructure requirements, both of which have changed since we did this last. So maybe let's just go through a bit of the other factors that go into the model through the rest of this presentation. But
Before you do, I'd make a couple comments. This, like, I just want to sort of on my own behalf, I know nobody else's behalf. The jump to go from 5,000 to almost 12,000, and we know that the UARB voted against deferring these charges to water meter, okay, to everyone's best efforts for whatever reason, is a huge, like, are you concerned that you could actually stymie development, like to the point where like people just can't afford to put all this upfront money? Like, when you talk about, say 100-unit building, well, that's an additional $700,000 of upfront permit money. Because now you're talking, a $1.2 million check just for the Halifax Water component, not for the HRM component, which is also increasing in fees. So are you concerned that, hey, you know what, like we could hurt our customers who are developers to build these projects? They won't have the equity, and the UARB, voted down the deferral. So people have to come up with this money right up front, right? Like I'm just a little bit concerned about that, and especially if even these numbers are going to be adjusted upwards further, I just think that we could really be hurting I'll say the customer, because we are your initial customer, the developer, right?
Yeah, and those are the things that that we will be talking about later in this presentation on the impact of the increase when the freeze comes off, in addition to the timing piece, and do we want to, as a collective group, want to revisit that? So those are coming up in the slides.
Okay.
All right. Yes, and yeah, don't forget, like, the presentation, if you missed a little bit in the front, it will be posted to YouTube to easily catch up. But yes, those questions are coming with time for discussion after. So with that, we're just gonna move forward through the presentation. Looked at the RDC model. Okay, so where are we going from here? We have a 5-year update for the RDC due July 10th, 2026. So this update is going to be using that 2019 IRP, which ends in 2046 in terms of that 30 years, infrastructure list. It's going to be escalated to the best available information in 2026, along with a few projects such as the biosolids and the water supply enhancement program. This IRP list was done for a very specific population. So we're going to be using the population estimate for that 2019 list. Because that's the infrastructure that was created for them. This model will be a 20-year model. So with a 20-year model, we're going to 2046, which is bringing us to the end of that 30-year IRP. We'll look at the post-period benefit and explore the use of residential equivalent units compared to the single unit dwelling, multi-unit dwelling, and the ICI numbers. So knowing this, so the best available information we have right now is the 2019 IRP, and I'll come back to the slide. Just jumping over to the growth comparison. To show this right now, our infrastructure list that we have right now that is the best available is for this many people down here. We know growth projections have been a lot higher than that. And for the next IRP, we'll be up here down under the green line for that. So as you can see, we know growth has come, like there's a lot more people. We can't just put the denominator as, more people under that infrastructure list because it's not for them. So knowing that this is going on for July 10th, we're in that 5-year cycle for that next IRP. That next IRP is going to end in 2056, and it's projected to be done by the fall of 2027. So in the fall of 2027, we're going to have a new infrastructure list for growth, and an associated population will be developed and incorporated into the RDC model. So with that, we have the 5-year update. We're using the best we can from the 2019, just, and to know that as this new IRP comes in with that new population and that new projects, that update will come soon after. So with that, is that understood with this 5-year update? That we're using the best available from 2019? Yes, James. I think you might be on mute again.
Yeah. I just want to clarify, a lot's happened since 2019 in terms of infrastructure projects. You are or you are not going to use, if you will, 2026 infrastructure projects list as opposed to the 2019 IRP list?
It will be the list that is used will be the 2019 IRP list escalated and updated for 2026. So I think it's no new modeling, no new regional infrastructure. It's looking at those projects. How do we implement them with more of a conceptual detailed design and the cost of them now? Which is, as you can imagine, the cost now is very different than what we could ever escalate or predict in 2019. Does that answer your question?
Well, it answers it, but I'm not sure that makes sense if you're not including infrastructure, that is relevant in 2026. I mean, why use, by the time the new IRP comes out, it'll, 7 or 8 year old infrastructure list when a lot has been built over these 5, 6 past years. I guess I'm confused why you wouldn't use current data.
It's, I guess, and Ken, to help me out,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
So I'll let Josh jump in. We're probably going to say the same thing.
So I think what we're trying to identify is the current IRP update project is looking at, it has a whole bunch of new assumptions being considered to develop potentially new servicing strategies across the municipality. At this point, we don't have those new servicing strategies or the potential large-scale projects identified and scoped and costed to include in the model at this time. I think we had requested to defer the RDC beyond the IRP update so that we would have that list, and that was not granted. However, we do expect that once we do get the new IRP project list from the update project, we anticipate that that will make up an RDC update in the future. But without the new servicing strategies identified and the projects that go with them, we're using the best information. I don't think it's 2019 stale data. It's using 2019 and what's happened since to the best of our knowledge to come up with the charge for July 10th, 26. And then upon IRP completion, we do expect that we'll be updating the charge for that new list.
Well, if I may follow up, let me ask it another way. Have there been projects developed in the last 6 years, not just cost increases, but actual projects that do not appear on the 2019 project list? And if so, wouldn't those be known and includable?
Yes.
But they're not going to be included, as I understand it.
Yes, they are.
They are.
They are.
Even though they're not on the 2019 list.
Yeah. It's
All
in
right,
the first bullet.
That says escalated. Okay, along with additional projects?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions before we move on? All right, seeing none, I will go to the next slide, which, okay, that was the growth comparison to show. And then, okay, demand side management. So demand side management is, we have a RFP, request for proposals, that is being drafted, and Halifax Water is engaging with Efficiency One. So demand side management is, answering the question, could capital projects be deferred or reduced due to the conservation of water and wastewater from the existing and future customer? This is, for example, could the RDC fund rain barrels to reduce the size of a wastewater and combined system project? At the same time, any changes to our water and wastewater quality needs to be also considered. So as this is a work in progress, there will be no demand side initiatives to inform the July 2026 RDC. I know there was like a directives coming out of the 2019 IRP or the RDC update in 9494. Halifax, this is information Halifax is moving with that information. It will not be available for July. Is there any questions about that? Yes, Bill. And your microphone is on mute.
Yeah, my only comment on that, Megan, is what you just said is accurate, but I don't want Halifax Water to understate what it has done demand side management with the current plan, in that it includes substantial infiltration inflow reduction, which is in fact the demand side management on the wastewater side. So you're substantially reducing the size of the infrastructure required to accommodate growth by removing all the infiltration inflow you have built into your basic plan. So you stated it like you're not doing any demand side management, and you're not going after maybe water side flow reduction and beyond what you're doing with your leak control and sort of stuff. But I think you are doing a tremendous amount of demand side management on the wastewater side. And that's built into the 2019 plan. So I just wanted to offer that comment.
Thank you. Yes, that is a good point about the wet weather management side of the issue. You'll see in the list, there is some wet weather, and yeah, like what you said, Belle, like that's where some of the demand side management has been come in, but as a separate project.
And if I may too, and thank you, Bill, for highlighting the I&I programs. So in the 2019, we introduced the language and the regulations to enable I&I projects and water demand side management projects to be considered if we could identify a gain to the regional infrastructure. So the I&I projects have been actioned. They've been included in the plan in 2019. We are delivering on some of those projects. They are funded by the RDC to gain regional capacity. And if anybody was watching the news this week, there's portions of one of those projects is incorporated into the Windsor Street Exchange project where we recently got some funding for. This was specific to a request by the consumer advocate in 2019 and feedback from a lot of the participants on this call to look at, can we make a transmission main smaller? Can we make a water treatment plant smaller by using specific demand side management techniques on the water side? So yes, we have our ongoing leak detection program that is continuing to operate, but what can we do more? And so we haven't advanced that as far as we had hoped to by now, but we are continuing to move on that. And so that's what we wanted to highlight, so that if a program can be funded and demonstrate that it makes the regional infrastructure smaller, we can fund that program using RDC money. So that legislation was put in place in 2019. But we don't have any specific projects on the infrastructure list, is what I think Megan's alluding to for those specific types of initiatives for 26. So.
All right. Peter.
Thanks. So I'm looking at a spreadsheet that I did. Let's get a date on it of February 20th, 2013. 13 years ago, where I reverse engineered as best I could with the information available, population projections, and the RDC list of projects that was in place at that point in time to calculate a daily incremental per cubic meter volumetric rate for the combination of sewer and water that was on the RDC list, and came to a figure. Then I did the math on a simple water conservation program in any typical apartment or home, calculated the cost and the volume savings. That number is between 1/6 and 1/10 the cost of building new infrastructure. And on top of that, once that new infrastructure is built and put in the ground, the utility needs to collect depreciation on it as a non-cash expense that goes onto the rate base, as you know, and as we know. So the fact that we're here 13 years later and it has advanced no further than my Excel sheet, which was provided to Halifax Water senior staff at the time, who said they didn't have time to look at it, literally, to be barreling along with these, repeated sessions without reviewing this when you're looking at spending some number of $1 billion or $1.5 billion. I just don't understand. If we can free up capacity in the system, and the number that Richard Butts told me the City of Toronto used was, I think, 7-1. And I've seen other numbers like that in other publications. Every dollar spent on water conservation programs saves $6 or $7 on capital. Consistent with my math, how we keep coming to these sessions and saying we don't have time to deal with it, I apologize, but I do not understand how you can be looking at a list of, $1 billion saying we don't have time to look at all of our options, and that the development community needs to continue to pay rates that are anticipated to more than double. I don't understand how and why. So anyway, that's it for my comment. happy to circulate the 2013 Excel sheet to anybody that was interested in looking at it.
Yes,
Yeah.
please share that
Yeah.
with myself.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask that, Peter, if you could recirculate it. I know I probably have it in an email here, but I would like to just, if you can send that along, and then we can see.
Specifically, it was Jamie Hannum that I gave it to, and he said, we don't have time to look at that. We got to get the money rolling in.
Yeah, and I think that now is the time, as we start to get some engagement with Efficiency One, that we can try and leverage those opportunities and try and see how we can demonstrate that certain programs, certain initiatives, certain assumptions, that type of thing, so that we can pull this together and put this one over the top. So we are committed to doing that, and we want to move this forward. So if you can send that along, that would be great. And we may need to have a separate conversation specifically on that, if you don't mind. So,
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next phase and like cover this last half an hour, 40 minutes, discussion feedback. As this presentation is being prepared and as we kind of like start this application, a couple questions have kind of come up internally that we would like to discuss with everyone. And before we get started, I see, Peter, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So one outstanding issue in my mind that I've mentioned before, and I've got another spreadsheet on this one, but the whole business of how the rate is calculated with the assumed number of people per unit, and it's calculated using 2.25 people in an apartment unit. The market is building based on probably 1.2 or 1.4. Halifax Water would be collecting based on that same 1.2 or 1.4, which just intrinsically yields an overcollection off the RDC, because the math, one of the critical numbers in the denominator is incorrect. So just want to lob that back on the table. That's still a major outstanding item.
Yes, that is from it. And as we look at the financial modeling of like the residential equivalent units and how that plays in, we'll have more information that way. So yeah, it's not included in this presentation. It's part of the financial modeling, more to come.
Again, raised in 2013. Okay, second line of questioning, and I completely get the utilities position of growth must pay for growth. But I think the whole approach here, and it's going on 40 years since I took my second year accounting courses dealing with management accounting. So I would be a bit rusty on it. But I think there is a whole line of economic analysis that could or should be done looking at the marginal cost of water, because a significant amount of the utilities cost would be fixed. So, if you're selling water at $4 per cubic meter and the marginal cost is $1, and I'm guessing that, it's in that range. So by virtue of the growth in demand, the rate base is actually benefiting by the spread between the sale price and the incremental cost. So I haven't seen any evidence where, call it the positive side of growth, is being accounted for. And it actually wouldn't be that difficult to do that analysis, to look at, yes, growth must pay for growth, but that $4 per cubic meter is actually that the new growth is paying, is actually subsidizing, because I don't think the fixed costs are growing at the same rate. So I guess it would be a question for Kenda and Louis. Have you ever looked at, like, call it a proper management accounting of the marginal cost of service, to look at that as negating some of the costs associated with growth?
And Louis, I don't know if you want to chime in, and if I'll let you start with that and some of the rate making principles that you use.
I'm trying to remember how long ago I did managerial accounting, and it's not quite 40 years, but it's probably pretty close. When we do our rate calculation, we start everybody back from scratch again and say, here's the total cost to deliver the services that we have. Here is the average consumption per customer, or here's the expected consumption from our customers. Here is the depreciation, the debt cost. So all of those costs go into the model. The estimated number of new customers go into the model. So I think we don't necessarily do it as an incremental piece, but when we develop our rates, we look at the full cost and the full number of customers, the full consumption, and the consumption charges and the base charges come out of that methodology. So I don't think we do, it's 4 and now will be 4.5 per, I don't think we slice it quite the same way, but we look at it, it's an entirety. And all that new growth is factored into that analysis.
Great. Okay, Bill?
On a different subject, you mentioned that either you have developed or will be developing a new allocation model for the ICI users using the residential equivalent user concept. Will you be sharing that work in this engagement process prior to the submitting of that application in July?
That is the plan. It's not available in this we're not going through it in this presentation, but at the end of this presentation, we will have the proposed kind of the interested party engagement plan to have things to look forward to.
Okay, so you're saying that prior to July, we'll see something about that new model?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Yeah, and if for those that were involved in the 2019 hearing, it was raised during the hearing as a methodology to use. The people on the call that are paying the RDC weren't part of that conversation, and so that's why it was a takeaway to look at that methodology and going to part of Peter's comment about looking at how the charge is set and the people per unit assumptions and those types of things. As we look at what does an REU charge look like, we're going to be getting the information on whether or not that people per unit is still a factor. It may be more land-based and land use type. So we're going to have that information to share to get feedback from the community on understanding understandability of it, administrative ease on doing it, and that type of thing. So there's a whole other session of conversation around how the rate is structured and getting that feedback for that purpose.
All right. So with that, there'll be an opportunity at the end if we have time to ask more questions in that proposed schedule. But first, we have a couple of just discussion and questions slides. So here we go with the first one. Oh no, I have to, okay. Click. Okay. The freeze ends at November 9th, 2026. Halifax Water is submitting the application in July of 2026. We know that our first RDC application had a phased-in approach. Our first day 1, July 14th of 2014, had a charge, and then in April of 2015, that charge was increased as a phased approach. So as an exciting note, that we have here, there's been a recent announcement for $28 million for the Windsor Street Exchange. That is through a different program than the CHIF funding. The Halifax Water is still working through the conditions pertaining to the funding. So we have not yet determined what portion, if any, is assigned to the RDC projects, but we will let you know as Halifax Water knows more. So with this discussion slide, we're interested to hear your thoughts on a phased implementation of the RDC increase. We know we need to get up here, and we're down here. How do we do that? And if anyone has any thoughts or ideas to share.
And I think this, Alex, is to where some of your questions around impact to industry and that type of thing. Back in 2014, we simply took half of the charge, applied it on July 14th, and the other half escalated April 1st. So there wasn't a lot of science around it. It was just divide it by half because it was going up so much more than the sewer redevelopment charge that was previously in place. So we just want to get some feedback from industry on knowing that it will probably have to go up. How do we want to kind of package this up or explore phasing options?
I have one suggestion, just a quick one that I jump in with is there a way to know what projects are already, like, you know, the realistic projects that are already underway and pro forma and you know, have budgeted for a lower RDC to hit an ongoing project, you know, with this increased cost right at building permit stage would be problematic, I think. So maybe just, you know, a delay, or at least for projects that are underway, even though a building permit hasn't been issued yet. That's one of potential many solutions.
And
Okay,
yeah,
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
Megan.
Nope.
Just to build on that and from a timing perspective, so we'll know more about what the charge is going to look like for the July 10th submission. Then we'll be going through a process at the RAB for, we expect there'll be a public hearing, given what this entails in past practice. To go through that public hearing process, get a decision, you're going to have a 6 to 9 month window before we get, this is what the charge is going to be. So there is a bit of a buffer, I guess, to do that financial planning. But I also am aware and understand and appreciate that these projects don't just start today and you're doing your financial planning for 6 months out per se. Like you're doing long-term planning for these larger projects, and it's years in the making. And so yeah, we can look at how it impacts on building permits as they come in and timing and that type of thing. But I see Alex has his hand up, so.
Well, you know, there's no easy answer, of course, in terms of getting that to that level. In terms of, you know, moving from 5,000 units to 12,000 units. So I don't really have a solution right now off the top of my head, but I just want to sort of mention something that, you know, obviously we talked about population growth earlier. I think we're seeing now the population growth stalling. I think we have to factor that in. And, you know, I just think that at the end of the day, you know, we need to keep that in mind as we move forward with some of these costs and some of these projections for infrastructure. And so that's the first comment, you know, I think we have to just be careful of, you know, and part of that is, you know, even when immigration reopens, we've become somewhat unaffordable here to live, right? I mean, I think that you can read the reports there. Halifax is not what it used to be in terms of affordability. And then in terms of these RDCs, you know, I can't stress enough the pressure that we're all under in terms of costs, whether it be, you know, financing costs, other governmental fees, and construction costs. And the unfortunate part, because these fees are due up front, and you know, we can't seem to convince the regulator that that they should defer these fees to the end. Because they're all upfront costs, I just caution you that it's going to be a major hit to the development, to your customer, right? Which is the development community, to pay these fees all upfront. So, I don't, like I said, I don't have a solution to phase it in. There's no, okay, make it 5% a year, because, you obviously want to go up by, 150% in 1 year. So, going 5% per year is not going to do the trick, right? So there's no easy answer for that. I just, it would be much better if let me put it this way. The hit would be a lot better if we could somehow convince the regulator to defer the fees to the end at building permit or at the water permit stage. Then I think it would be much easier to swallow the fees, and you'd have less resistance, and less, I'll say, impact to the overall project than having that money need to be in the project upfront as equity. So,
Which is an excellent segue into our next question about the permit fees at the meter. So we could just skip there to the timing of the collection. So as you know, as you said, Alex, we collect the building permits. When the building permit is submitted, the community is asked for it to be at the water meter to eliminate that and to eliminate those barriers. And the direction from the NSRAB has been, to put this at the next RDC hearing. So like with that, checking with the interested parties, it sounds like, do you still want the RDC collection to be at the water meter? Is that something that the community wants, has suggestions for
Yes.
the times? Okay, thank you. With that, to do it, to be aware, to eliminate those barriers, and not to say it like we've tried twice, but like we're coming up at that point for that more wholesome, comprehensive analysis is approaching. So looking for feedback, other comments, helpful hints for success. And I see, Peter, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I just think it is important that it get clarified to to everybody in the room here that the application for the deferral of the fees was only on the water side. It wasn't didn't cover the sanitary sewer and
No.
stormwater.
It was for both, Peter. Yep.
I don't think so.
We did, we changed the language or proposed language to the regulations that the majority of our services are going to be water and wastewater. And so we proposed that it would be collected at the water meter, and assuming that both would be in place and the building was getting close to being finished. So it was intended for both. We also proposed language that if we had a wastewater only customer, that it was related, I think, to the inspection timing of that, where there wouldn't be a water meter. So the intention was for both water and wastewater to be collected at the meter stage.
Yeah, the application that I read, it was clear it was water only deferred. So did that get changed partway through the hearing?
No. It was, even when both times that we went, the language that we proposed in the regulations was to enable water and wastewater. And if we have to make that a bit more clear for industry, but the intention was for both to be deferred.
Yeah, because I thought it was at the point of connection, which for the sewer would be pretty much at the start of the project, because you connect, your lateral early days.
Yeah, and it was meant to be those were for wastewater only customers, that we didn't have a water meter to hold as, I guess, the carrot to make sure the money was collected. So yeah,
I'll go back through.
Yeah,
and maybe I misread
yeah,
it.
And if we need to clarify that for certainty, happy to revisit that language and make sure that everybody understands. But that was the intention.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Steve.
Thank you, Megan. So I went over, I mean, we're disappointed in the decision by the board. I'm still struggling with why is it that, or how do they come with that result when Halifax Water supported the collection of fees at meter installation. Industry supported it, yet they said that the argument wasn't compelling enough. And I'm trying to understand, I've gone back over this in my mind several times, and I'm still trying to find out where I fell short in the presentation. I don't understand. Can anyone offer a suggestion as to what I missed?
I know, like, looking at the first time that we went through, there was 3 points in terms of the savings, what other industry across Canada was doing. So I know there's been recent changes in different provinces' legislation about when it's collected. So perhaps we could take a look at that together to see what other compelling evidence of other jurisdictions have changed, to take a look. Because
Okay.
as you can imagine, we're not the only, like, other communities and development chairs have done that. So here's the time to do it as the RDC, and we need support from the development community to try again.
Okay, you'll get it.
All right,
Well,
Alex?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, the fundamentally the problem with the argument, when we make the argument is that we have to assume that, we've spoken about this before, so we are on the same side here, but if we're going to the UARB and the problem is the consumer advocate is trying to tie these RDC fees into the, general rate, I'll say, general rates and general to the average consumer, right? The issue is that whether, like, let's pretend for a moment on a hypothetical scenario where there is no development anymore, like for, let's say, 2 or 3 years, nobody puts a shovel in the ground. Okay. So there's no RDCs collected, right? Because if nobody's building, there's no RDCs to collect. In that scenario, nothing changes for the general rate for the consumer, right? Because as you guys have intimated to them many times, there's 2 separate buckets. There's the RDC fees. They're over here on this side, correct? Where's my Mr. CFO here? Laurence is here on this call somewhere. Anyway, there's one separate bucket over here, and then there's a separate bucket over here that deals with, general rates. Okay, so the two are not interrelated in any way. I don't think we've perhaps adequately explained that to the UARB to say, if nobody builds tomorrow for 3-4 years and we don't collect any RDCs, nothing changes for the general rate application, people. And if we do collect this money, nothing changes for the general rate applications. Okay, and I keep saying general rate applications. I'm talking about the increase in water rates and so forth, so that they understand clearly that there's a true and 100% delineation between these two. There is no tie whatsoever to the average consumer as it relates to the RDCs, right? And I don't think we've, because they haven't got that in their head, nor has the consumer advocate, and nor has the board, in my opinion, made that delineation in their mind. Would you guys agree?
So for the record, it's Louis.
Yes, Louis, sorry. Yes.
No problem. Yeah, I think part of the issue with the regulator, I think they understand that they're 2 completely different processes and the impact. I think part of the challenge we've faced is they want us to come back as part of this wholesome review of RDCs. I think they want us to package it in with this update and say, now's, if you didn't like it the timing of the first 2 times of when we came forward, this is the time to look at that. And I think if we need to be better at explaining the subtleties of the differences, we can continue to try. But I think they've been looking for us to say, okay, great. July 15th, looking at the timing of the collection, integrated with whatever additional costs, approaches, they're looking for it to be done as a wholesome review. And I think I'm hopeful we have more success through this update.
Yeah, and I think to your comments and Steve's comments, we need to go back grab what we did when it was a standalone application, look at what the feedback and the conversation through the transcripts were on the one that we just did with the general rate application, and try and make sure that we're addressing all the concerns, questions, and building that more wholesome, fulsome application narrative. And the reason we put it in, and if you go back, the board had told us when we asked the first time, bring it back as part of the RDC. Where the charge was frozen and we weren't sure when we were going to go back with the RDC, we thought we would put it into the conversation on the general rate application. And so there was a bit of confusion around that as to why we brought it in the general rate application, but we thought industry wants to have this conversation. This is an avenue and a platform to have it. Let's have that conversation. So we're hearing a resounding, which we thought, but we wanted to make sure that everybody wanted to take another run at this. And I think we roll up our sleeves and we sit down and we figure out, how do we tell this story? How do we present and address the concerns from the board and any other interveners or any other participants in the hearing? And then we kind of make that plan for the submission in July.
All right, so that is, I guess this is a yes, and we'll include it as we move forward with that. Just moving forward in terms of time, we have our kind of like the third question is that with any RDC increase, especially when we know there's an influx of permits, each water permit has a 2-year expiry. And with more permits, that changes Halifax Water's level of service. Thinking about how a change in the level of service will affect your timelines with building, how can Halifax Water prioritize permits during this influx? I don't know when the charge will be implemented, but moving ahead and working together, how can we work together with all these permits that come in? There may be permits that are ready to dig, others that are taking advantage of the RDC charge coming in. Any advice or suggestions would be really helpful to our engineering group, because we do prioritize permits in terms of date. So if we get a lot that come in, it's going to take longer. So seeing none, are we all just getting ahead of things? Like once that RDC increase does come in, the level of service will increase and permits will take longer to go through with prioritization with that. But if anyone has any suggestions, if they don't have any suggestions now, that's all right. We're always welcome to take some. It's just, yeah, they come in the day that they're due and with that aspect. All right, so with that, we will move forward to the next slide. So we're proposed engagement plan. So dates are set. We are proposing 3 sessions for this. So the first one is today, where we're regrouping, looking at the background information, having a few discussion points. The next one, kind of aiming for late May, is presenting those numbers and options and presenting the estimates of the RDC. So it would probably be a little bit longer of a session and looking at those details. And then finally ending with a session about what application is going to the NSRAB. This would be, telling you about the application rather than you going to the application and finding out, providing different information on how to intervene. We know this cost is going up. Everything is going up. In that sense, we want to work together with the community to answer those questions, to gain more information, to see what else is going on. So with that, is there any questions about that proposed engagement plan? And I see James.
Yes, just to be clear, it was raised earlier, but I want to make sure Halifax Water is aware of this issue with respect to the next 2 meetings. I'd strongly suggest by late May, the residential equivalent unit methodology discussion and your proposed approach is presented. So there's time for discussion, for modification if necessary, and so forth. this has been long in the making, and to be honest with you, I thought it would have been initiated years ago. It was quite clear in the 94, matter 9494 decision that would be taking place before the next RDC, which again has been postponed already. So anyway, if that could be circulated in time for review by the May meeting, that would be very helpful.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that feedback of like providing maybe something before the presentation is said. We could definitely, yeah, we could look into that aspect. Next, Bill. Yes, Bill.
Yeah, so building on what James said, a question I have is the review of the new models, like the equivalent user residential unit approach. Is that something that has been or will be done in-house, or have you engaged a consultant to develop that?
Louis, you can take that.
Yes, the plan is to engage a consultant.
A plan as in yet to have occurred and will occur in the next few months, or is something in the works?
The intent is to award it and get it completed very quickly.
There's been preliminary work done to date, and then we just have to revisit it with current data and everything. So there is preliminary work that has been done.
And do you have a
Sorry, what was that, Bill? You kind of cut out there.
I said, do you have a timeline when you expect you'll have a finished product from a consultant in that regard?
Not yet.
So with that aspect of like scheduling meetings, we do have an RDC engagement website where we will post everything and those updates. So nothing's been scheduled, but I still plan to do the same thing, kind of send out a save the date, and then a week before send out the team's invite with that aspect. James, you have your hand up?
I don't want to belabor the point, but I have to say I'm quite concerned about the timing of the REU work. If you're planning to engage a consultant, the RFP has not been issued yet. These things take quite a bit of time. It's almost mid-April. We're talking about late May for the next session. So I'm not sure if anything can be done about it, but it does not instill confidence that this will be available by then at all. And again, it's been years since this was ordered, and I hope you're able to pull it off, but it's a concern. And I would urge you to do everything you can to get an RFP out, get a consultant on board if it's going to be done externally, and to have it on a fast track. And I'm sorry to belabor it, but it's been on the agenda for a long time.
Thank you. And yes, it has been. We weren't able to change anything until we made this application to the RAB for this update. We did start preliminary work when we were on track for the initial update, but with the freeze, we had to pause that work because we couldn't continue to pay consultants and do work when we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. So we're re-engaging and just cleaning that up and picking up from where we left on the preliminary stuff and getting something in place so that we can meet this. So it's not that nobody has done nothing on it since the 2019 application. It got paused in 23.
All right, with that, we will move forward to the next slide. I have this is just a quick, is there any other additional, before we wrap up the session, is there any additional questions or comments? Okay, So seeing none, and this doesn't mean, and like, especially for those who are joining us from a different place and a different time, feel free to email your comments to engineeringapprovals@halifaxwater.ca with any other questions or comments, or if you feel you need to meet one-on-one, definitely open to having those discussions. So looking at the summary, we provided background information and sources for the regional development charges, showed a timeline of the last year, and showed how we're going to move forward to July 10th. We had a couple questions for discussion, and then the proposed interested engagement plan. So in terms of the next steps, if you have any other additional comments or information to look for, please send it to engineering approvals. Reference the slide number and the title just so you can easily be directed to that. Visit the engagement website for background information and updates, and schedule number 2 will be scheduled soon that way. I imagine it's going to be another email, save the date, coming from me, and then following up by a Teams invite the week before. So with that, we are now out of time, and I don't see any other questions. So I thank you very much for joining us with the discussions, and a big thank you to the people that are watching this on YouTube and to providing their feedback. And we will see you again soon. But in the meantime, we're available for question, comments, and discussions.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Enjoy the